Captain Lee Hyun-woo stared at the empty space where New Busan's orbital station should have been buzzing with activity. His cargo ship Daegu had made this run dozens of times. The Korean mining colony always greeted arriving vessels with excited chatter over the radio and busy docking crews ready to unload supplies. Today, there was only silence. "Sir, I'm not picking up any signals from the colony," reported Communications Officer Park Ji-hai from her station. She had been trying to reach New Busan for the past hour as they approached the planet. No response on any frequency. Lee frowned and moved to the main viewer. The planet Kepler 442c looked normal from orbit. The same blue-green surface, the same white clouds drifting across the continents. But something felt wrong. The orbital platforms that should have been mining asteroids hung motionless in space like dead insects. "Maybe their equipment is broken," suggested engineer Kim Tae-min, though he didn't sound convinced. New Busan was one of humanity's most successful colonies. They had the best technology and over 2 million people living there. "Take us down to the main spaceport," Lee ordered. As they descended through the atmosphere, he tried to push away the growing worry in his chest. There had to be a simple explanation. The spaceport came into view first. Lee had expected to see the usual crowd of cargo ships, passenger transports, and mining vehicles moving back and forth. Instead, the landing pads were empty except for a few abandoned ships sitting crooked on the ground, their cargo doors hanging open. Daegu touched down with a soft thud. Through the windows, the crew could see the spaceport buildings. They looked normal, but there were no people walking around. No ground crews running to meet them. No vehicles moving anywhere. "This is really strange," whispered Park Ji-hai. She was a tough woman who had served in the military, but her voice shook slightly. Lee made a decision. "Kim, you stay with the ship. Park, grab your equipment. We're going to take a look around." They put on their environment suits and stepped outside. The air was breathable, but Lee wanted to be careful. Their boots echoed strangely in the empty spaceport. Every building had its lights on, but no one was inside. "Look at this," Park called out. She was standing next to a coffee shop near the main terminal. Through the window, they could see half-finished meals on the tables. A cup of coffee sat on the counter with steam still rising from it, as if someone had just put it down. They walked through the terminal building. Luggage sat abandoned on conveyor belts. Computer screens still showed arrival and departure times. In one office, they found a desk with papers scattered across it and a chair pushed back, like someone had stood up quickly and never returned. "Where is everyone?" Kim's voice crackled through their radio from the ship. Lee and Park continued into the main colony city. The streets were lined with neat houses and apartment buildings, all typical of Korean settlements. Gardens bloomed with earth flowers that the colonists had brought with them. But every home was empty. In some houses, they found dinner plates, still sitting on tables with food that had spoiled days ago. Children's toys lay scattered in playrooms. Beds were unmade, as if people had gotten up for a normal day and simply vanished. "Captain, you need to see this," Park said from the colony's communication center. The building housed all of New Busan's long-range radio equipment for talking to Earth and other colonies. Inside, banks of computers still hummed quietly. Most of the screens showed normal system status, but one terminal displayed something that made Lee's blood run cold. It was the colony's last outgoing transmission, sent 6 months ago according to the timestamp. The message was being broadcast on every frequency New Busan could reach: emergency channels, commercial frequencies, even the old Earth military bands. The entire message was just one word, repeated over and over: help, help, help. Then the A. Transmission cut to static. 6 months, Park said quietly. They've been gone for 6 months and nobody noticed? Lee studied the timestamp. New Busan was supposed to send regular reports to Earth every month. Someone should have realized they had gone quiet. But the colony was far from Earth, and maybe the bureaucrats had just assumed their reports were delayed. They spent the rest of the day searching the city. They found more abandoned meals, more empty houses, more signs that people had disappeared in the middle of their daily lives. But they found no bodies, no signs of violence, no weapons or blast marks. It was as if 2 million people had simply decided to walk away and never come back. As the sun began to set, they returned to the ship. Kim had been monitoring radio frequencies and scanning the planet from orbit. His report was grim. "I've checked every major settlement on the planet," he said. "All empty. No life signs anywhere. But, Captain, there's something else. I'm picking up some strange readings from the northern continent." The next morning, they flew Daegu to the coordinates Kim had found. What they discovered there made no sense at all. An entire city had been covered in what looked like blue crystal. The crystal formations grew over buildings, streets, and vehicles like frozen water, but they sparkled with their own inner light. Some of the crystals were as tall as skyscrapers. "What could do this?" Park asked as they circled overhead. "I don't know," Lee replied, "but I don't think we should get too close." They landed at a safe distance and approached on foot. Up close, the crystals were beautiful but terrifying. They seemed to pulse gently, like they were alive. When Lee held his scanner near one of the smaller formations, the device went crazy with readings he didn't understand. "These aren't normal minerals," Kim reported after studying the data. "The molecular structure keeps changing. It's like they're growing." Deep inside the crystal formations, they could see the dark shapes of buildings and vehicles that had been completely covered. And sometimes, if they looked very carefully, they could see what might have been the outlines of people frozen forever inside the blue crystal. Park found something else near the edge of the crystal field. It was a personal recording device, the kind colonists used to send video messages to family back on Earth. Somehow, it had escaped being covered by the crystals. They took the device back to their ship and played it. The recording showed Mayor Choi Soo-jin, a middle-aged woman Lee had met on previous supply runs. She looked frightened but was trying to stay calm. "This is Mayor Choi of New Busan," she said in the recording. "Something is happening here. We can hear singing from the sky, beautiful singing that makes people want to go outside and look up. But everyone who goes outside—" The recording shook as explosions sounded in the background. "The blue light comes down and touches them, and then they just disappear. We're trying to get everyone to stay inside, but the singing is so beautiful, and people can't help themselves." The recording cut to static, just like the emergency transmission. Lee looked at his crew. They were all thinking the same thing. Whatever had happened to New Busan was not natural. Something had come from space and taken every person on the planet. "We need to get back to Earth," Lee said. "We need to warn them." As Daegu lifted off from New Busan, Lee took one last look at the planet that had been home to 2 million people just 6 months ago. Now it was a tomb covered in crystal, with one final message echoing through space. Help. But who would help them? And what if whatever had taken New Busan was still out there, looking for its next target? Admiral Yoon Sang-ho read the report from New Busan for the 3rd time, hoping he had missed something that would make it less terrifying. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. His office in the United Colonies. Defense Command overlooked Lake Geneva, where the morning sun made the water sparkle like the crystals Captain Lee had described. "Sir, Dr. Lim is here to see you," his aide announced from the doorway. Dr. Lim Yunji entered, carrying a sealed container that seemed to glow with a faint blue light. She was the head of Earth's Xenobiology Division, one of the smartest people Yoon had ever met. But today she looked worried. "Admiral, we need to talk about the samples from New Busan," she said, setting the container carefully on his desk. "I've been studying them for 3 days, and what I've found is not good news." Yoon leaned forward. "Tell me." "These crystals aren't minerals. They're organic. Living tissue that's been changed into something like crystal, but still growing and spreading." She touched a control on the container, and a holographic display showed the internal structure of the crystal sample. "Look at this molecular pattern. It's converting everything it touches into more of itself." "You mean it's alive?" "More than alive. It's intelligent. The way it grows follows complex patterns, like it's building something. And Admiral, it's still active. Even this small sample has grown 12% since we brought it here." Yoon felt a chill run down his spine. How fast could it spread? If it got loose on Earth, it could cover the entire planet in less than a year. Lim's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she sealed the container again. "But that's not the worst part. I found traces of human DNA inside the crystal structure. Not just traces, patterns. Like it absorbed people and kept their genetic information." Before Yoon could respond, his communication system chimed with an urgent message. Captain Nam Do-hyun's face appeared on the screen. Nam commanded one of Earth's long-range scout ships, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Admiral, we have a problem," Nam reported. "I'm transmitting coordinates for 3 more colonies that have gone silent. Busan Prime, New Jeju-do, and Terra Sol. All of them stopped responding in the past month." Yoon's heart sank. 4 colonies now. "Have you investigated?" "I flew by Busan Prime yesterday. Same thing as New Busan. Empty cities, abandoned spaceports, and those blue crystals covering half the planet. But Admiral, there's something else. I've been tracking energy signatures in deep space. Something big is moving through our outer colonies, and it's heading toward the inner systems." The holographic display changed to show a star map with Nam's ship positions over the past month. Red dots marked the locations of the silent colonies, and a dotted line showed the path of the unknown energy signatures. "It's following our trade routes," Yoon realized. "Moving from colony to colony toward Earth." Nam nodded grimly. "Whatever this thing is, it knows where we live." Over the next week, the situation got worse. 2 more colonies went silent. Each time, the last transmission was the same: a desperate call for help, then nothing. Scout ships sent to investigate found the same pattern every time: empty settlements, crystal formations, and no survivors. Dr. Lim's team worked around the clock to understand the crystal samples. What they learned was terrifying. The crystals could break down any form of matter and rebuild it into their own structure. Worse, they seemed to target living tissue first, especially intelligent life. "It's like they're designed to harvest civilizations," Lim explained to the Emergency Council meeting. Representatives from every major Earth nation filled the room, all looking frightened and confused. "The crystals don't just kill people, they absorb them. Their memories, their knowledge, everything that makes them human gets stored in that crystal matrix." President Kang Min-ho of the Korean Federation spoke first. "Dr. Lim, are you saying this is some kind of weapon?" "I'm saying it's worse than a weapon. It's a collection system. Something is gathering entire civilizations and storing them. Chancellor Seo Hee-won of the European Union leaned forward. Storing them for what purpose? I don't know, Lim admitted. But based on the complexity of these structures, whatever built them is far more advanced than we are. The final piece of the puzzle came from Captain Lee's crew, who had continued analyzing the recording from New Busan's mayor. Engineer Kim Tae-min had enhanced the audio and found something hidden beneath the static. Play it again, Admiral Yoon ordered. The recording of Mayor Choi played on the main screen, but this time they could hear what Kim had discovered. Beneath her voice and the sounds of panic in the colony, there was something else. A low musical humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. That's the singing she mentioned, Kim explained. But when I analyzed the frequency, I found something strange. It's not random. It's a signal carrying massive amounts of data. What kind of data? Yoon asked. Information about our colonies. Population numbers, technology levels, military capabilities. Someone was scanning New Busan and transmitting the data somewhere else. The room fell silent as everyone realized what this meant. The attacks on the colonies weren't random. Something was studying humanity, learning about them, and systematically harvesting their settlements. Admiral, Nam's voice came through the communication system again. He sounded exhausted and frightened. I'm at Terra Sol now. The whole planet is covered in those crystals. But, sir, I'm picking up that same energy signature again. It's massive. Maybe 10 times bigger than anything we've ever built. And it's heading straight for New Sol. New Sol was one of humanity's most important agricultural worlds, home to 15 million people. It supplied food to dozens of other colonies and had some of the strongest planetary defenses outside of Earth itself. How long until it arrives? Yoon asked. 6 hours, maybe less. Yoon looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. They were all thinking the same thing. If whatever was out there could destroy New Sol's defenses, no human colony was safe. Nam, get your ship to a safe distance and monitor the situation. Record everything. Yes, sir. 6 hours later, Nam transmitted the final moments of New Sol. The energy signature he had been tracking turned out to be a ship unlike anything humans had ever imagined. It was organic, like a living creature the size of a moon. As it approached New Sol, it began to sing. The song was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Even through Nam's recordings, the council members felt a strange urge to step outside and look up at the sky. On New Sol, 15 million people heard that song and couldn't resist walking out of their homes, out of their shelters, out of their defensive bunkers. Blue light poured down from the creature like gentle rain. Everything it touched began to change into crystal. Buildings, vehicles, people, all of it transformed and absorbed into growing structures that reached toward the sky like fingers. The planetary defense fleet tried to fight back, but their weapons had no effect on the creature. It simply absorbed the energy from their attacks and grew larger. In less than 4 hours, New Sol was completely covered in crystal formations, and 15 million people had vanished. The last transmission from New Sol was the same as all the others. Help. Then silence. Admiral Yoon stood before the emergency. Council with the weight of humanity's survival on his shoulders. Outside the window, Earth looked peaceful and beautiful. But somewhere in space, an ancient evil was coming for them. Ladies and gentlemen, he said quietly, we are at war. President Kang asked the question everyone was thinking. How do we fight something like that? Yoon looked at the star map showing the path of destroyed colonies, all leading toward Earth. I don't know. But we have to try, because if we don't, the next message saying help will be coming from Earth itself. What do you need? Chancellor Seo asked. Yoon's answer would change the course of human history. Everything, every ship, every weapon, every person who can fight. If this thing wants humanity, it's going to have to take us all. The war room in Geneva had become the most important place in human space. Representatives from every nation, colony, and corporation sat around the massive holographic display showing Earth's solar system. For the first time in centuries, humanity was truly united. They had no choice. Admiral Yoon stood at the center looking tired but determined. The enemy will reach our outer defense perimeter in 6 months. We have that long to prepare. President Kang Min-ho studied the fleet reports, scrolling across his screen. How many ships do we have? Fleet Admiral Bae Young-soo, who had been working for 3 days straight organizing Earth's response, answered without looking up from his tablet. Our total military fleet numbers about 50,000 ships of all classes. But if we include civilian vessels that can be converted... How many? Yoon pressed. 700,000 ships, sir. Everything from luxury cruise liners to cargo haulers to mining barges. If it can fly and carry weapons, we can use it. The number hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. Never in human history had so many ships been gathered for a single purpose. Chancellor Seo Hee-won leaned forward. Can civilian ships really fight this enemy? Commander Oh Ji-won, who had served in the Martian Independence War 20 years ago, stepped forward. With respect, Chancellor, we're not going to fight them ship to ship. We're going to swarm them. She activated a tactical display showing her battle plans. The enemy relies on that singing to control people and those crystals to absorb our technology. But they've only faced small groups of ships at each colony. They've never faced all of humanity at once. Explain, Yoon ordered. Think of it like fighting a giant with bees, Oh said. 1 bee can't hurt a giant, but 10 million bees can kill anything. We're going to hit them with so many ships, so many weapons, so many attacks from every direction that even something that size can't absorb it all. Premier Jang Woo-jin of the Pacific Alliance looked skeptical. And if it doesn't work? Then, humanity dies fighting instead of dies singing, Oh replied simply. The mobilization began immediately. Every shipyard in the solar system switched to war production. Luna's orbital factories, which normally built peaceful cargo ships, started producing missile launchers and armor plating. Mars's industrial complexes worked around the clock to retrofit civilian vessels with weapons. Engineer Han Sung-min led the weapons development team. Using samples from the crystal formations found at New Busan, his team created new types of ammunition designed to disrupt the enemy's molecular conversion process. We can't stop them from turning our ships into crystals, Han explained to the Engineering Council. But we can make it hurt. These quantum disruption warheads will cause massive explosions when the crystals try to absorb them. How massive? Asked Dr. Lim. Think of it like feeding a bomb to something that wants to eat metal. When it tries to digest the warhead, the quantum field collapses and releases enough energy to vaporize a city block. Meanwhile, Captain Ryu Ji-soo of Earth Intelligence had been studying every piece of data they had about the enemy. What she found was both terrifying and hopeful. I've been analyzing the attack patterns on our colonies, she reported to Admiral Yoon. This enemy isn't just powerful, it's ancient. I found references to similar attacks in archaeological records from dead civilizations we've discovered. Yoon frowned. How old are we talking about? Millions of years. These things have been harvesting intelligent species since before humans existed. They wait in the deep space between galaxies, watching for civilizations to develop space travel. Then they come to collect them. That's the terrifying part, Yoon said. What's the hopeful part? Ryu smiled grimly. They're used to civilizations that surrender or run away. According to the records I found, most species either try to hide when they realize what's coming, or they offer to serve the enemy in exchange for being spared. But humans do stupid things like fight back, Yoon finished. Exactly. I don't think they're prepared for a species that gets angry when attacked. The conversion of civilian ships into warships was a massive undertaking. Luxury crews. Ships designed to carry wealthy tourists between Earth and Mars were fitted with missile tubes where their swimming pools used to be. Cargo haulers that normally carried grain and manufactured goods now held nuclear warheads and quantum torpedoes. Captain Park Min-soo watched as his merchant vessel Incheon was transformed into a weapon of war. His ship had spent 15 years carrying supplies between colonies, a peaceful mission that kept families fed and businesses running. Now technicians were installing plasma cannons where his cargo holds used to be. It doesn't feel right, he told Commander Oh as they watched the work. She was built to help people, not kill them. She's still helping people, Oh replied. Now she's helping to keep them alive. The biggest challenge was training. Most civilian ship crews had never fired a weapon in anger. They knew how to navigate asteroid fields and dock with space stations. But combat was completely different. Colonel Park Ji-hai, who had found the first evidence of the enemy at New Busan, was put in charge of training civilian crews for combat. Her approach was simple and direct. Forget everything you know about flying carefully, she told a group of cargo ship captains. In battle, careful gets you killed. When we meet the enemy, I want you to fly like you're insane. Ram them, explode next to them, do anything except let them sing to your crew. What if we can't resist the singing? Asked one captain. That's why every ship is being fitted with sonic dampeners and sealed combat bridges. And if those fail? Park's expression was grim. Then you better hope your crew remembers that dying free is better than living as crystals. As the months passed, the size of humanity's fleet grew beyond anything anyone had imagined. Ships arrived from the farthest colonies, their crews eager to fight for their species' survival. Even the hermit miners from the outer asteroid belt came in, offering their tough little ships and their knowledge of how to survive in space. Dr. Lim's research team made another disturbing discovery about the enemy crystals. They didn't just store the bodies of their victims. They stored their minds as well. The crystals preserve the consciousness of everyone they absorb, she explained to the War Council. Somewhere inside those formations are the minds of every person from New Busan, New Seoul, and all the other colonies. They're still alive, but trapped. This news changed everything. The war wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rescue. You're telling me that everyone we thought was dead is actually being held prisoner? Admiral Yoon asked. That's exactly what I'm telling you, and if we can disrupt the crystal matrices holding them, we might be able to free them. This gave humanity's cause a new urgency. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to save millions of people who had already been captured. As the final month of preparation began, Earth's skies were filled with ships. The orbital dockyards couldn't handle the traffic. So temporary staging areas were set up around the moon and in the asteroid belt. Everywhere you looked, there were vessels preparing for war. Admiral Yoon took a shuttle to inspect the fleet personally. What he saw made him proud and terrified at the same time. 700,000 ships, carrying 50 million volunteers from every corner of human space. Farmers and factory workers serving alongside professional soldiers. Teenagers barely, old enough to fly sitting next to grandparents who remembered the old wars. "Sir," Fleet Admiral Bay reported as they flew past the main battle group, "the fleet is ready." Yoon looked out at the massive formation of ships stretching beyond the horizon. Each one represented someone's decision to risk everything for humanity's future. Each crew had said goodbye to their families, knowing they might never return. "No," Yoon said quietly. "We're as ready as we can be. But I don't think anyone can really be ready for what's coming." In the deep space beyond Pluto, long-range sensors detected the approach of something enormous. The enemy was coming, drawn by the signals from all of humanity's colonies like a predator following a scent trail. The final message went out to every ship in the human fleet. "Remember why we fight. We fight for the people singing in the crystals. We fight for the children who will never know this terror. We fight because when our colonies called for help, we answered. Now it's time to show this ancient evil what happens when you threaten humanity." 700,000 ships began their journey to the edge of the solar system, carrying with them the hopes and dreams of an entire species. Behind them, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, beautiful and fragile. The enemy had heard humanity's call for help from the colonies. Now they would hear humanity's answer. The human fleet spread across space like a metal cloud, 700,000 ships arranged in a formation that stretched for millions of kilometers. Admiral Yoon stood on the bridge of the flagship Seoul, watching the tactical display that showed every vessel under his command. Never before had so many ships flown together for a single purpose. "Sir, we're approaching the Kepler system," reported Navigation Officer Lee So-young. "The enemy should be visible soon." Through the main view screen, the star Kepler 442 came into view. But something was wrong with it. The star that had once burned bright yellow now flickered with a sickly blue light, dimmer than it should have been. "What happened to the star?" someone whispered. Admiral Shin Kyung-ho, who commanded the Advanced Reconnaissance Group, provided the answer. "Sir, you need to see this." The display changed to show detailed scans of the Kepler system. What they saw made everyone on the bridge fall silent. Massive organic structures surrounded the star like a cage made of living tissue. Each structure was the size of Earth's moon, dark and pulsing with veins of blue light. They were feeding on the star itself, draining its energy through tendrils that reached deep into the burning plasma. "How many of those things are there?" Yoon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 47 major structures, sir, and they're all connected by some kind of organic network. The entire system has been turned into a feeding ground. Dr. Lim's voice came through the communication system from her research ship. "Admiral, I'm reading massive biological activity. Those structures aren't ships or buildings. They're alive. The entire system has been converted into a single organism." As the human fleet moved closer, more details became visible. The surfaces of the feeding structures were covered with crystal formations identical to those found on the dead colonies. But these crystals were enormous, some reaching hundreds of kilometers into space like frozen lightning. "Sir," reported Captain Nam Do-hyun from his scout ship, "I'm detecting movement near the largest structure. Something's coming out." What emerged from the feeding stations defied human understanding. Ships that weren't ships but living creatures the size of cities. Their hulls rippled like skin, and they moved through space with the grace of swimming whales. As they approached the human fleet, they began to sing. The song hit the human ships, like a physical force. Even through the sonic dampeners and sealed bridges, crew members could feel it in their bones. It was beautiful beyond description, a harmony that made people want to stop fighting and just listen forever. All ships, activate. Quantum static generators now, Admiral Yoon ordered. Do not listen to the singing. Across the fleet, ships began broadcasting white noise and chaotic frequencies to block the alien song. But the music was so pure, so perfect, that some ships still slowed down as their crews became mesmerized. Sir, we're losing ships in Sector 7, reported Fleet Admiral Bay. 12 vessels have stopped responding and are drifting toward the enemy. Yoon watched on the tactical display as the alien creatures approached the disabled human ships. Blue light poured from the creatures like water, covering the ships and beginning the crystal conversion process. In minutes, the vessels were transformed into more feeding structures. But then something unexpected happened. The largest alien creature, easily 50 kilometers long, moved to the center of the human formation. Instead of attacking, it began to broadcast directly into the minds of every human in the fleet. Images flooded their consciousness, visions of countless civilizations across millions of years, species that had reached for the stars only to be harvested when they became interesting enough. Each race had a choice. Join the collective willingly and preserve their culture forever in the crystal matrices, or resist and be absorbed by force. The images showed the Zephyrians, a proud warrior race that had chosen to fight. Their last battle had lasted 3 days before their entire species was absorbed. The Mindari had tried to hide in the depths of space, but the creatures had found them anyway. The Corvani had actually surrendered immediately, hoping for mercy that never came. But along with the images came something else: emotions. The collective consciousness of every absorbed species flowed through the alien creature's message. Pain, loss, regret, and underneath it all, a terrible loneliness that had grown for millions of years. We are the devourers. The voice spoke in every human mind at once. We have traveled between the galaxies since before your star was born. We preserve species that show promise, keeping them eternal in our matrices. Your colonies have been absorbed. Their knowledge is now part of our collective. You have one choice: join them willingly or be taken by force. Admiral Yoon felt the weight of the creature's ancient mind pressing against his consciousness. The being had absorbed thousands of intelligent species and knew their thoughts, their fears, their dreams. It understood technology, art, music, love, and war from countless perspectives, but there was something it didn't understand. You want our answer? Yoon broadcast back, using the fleet's communication array to amplify his thoughts. Here it is. We'd rather die fighting than live as prisoners in your crystal cages. The response that came back wasn't anger or surprise. It was confusion. You do not understand, the devourer replied. Death is permanent. Absorption is eternal. Your people still exist within our matrices. They are happy. They sing with us now. Show me, Yoon demanded. The vision that followed broke the hearts of every human in the fleet. They saw the colonists from New Busan, New Seoul, and all the other absorbed worlds. But these weren't the people they remembered. The colonists existed as pure consciousness within the crystal structures, experiencing a perfect shared reality, where there was no pain, no conflict, no death. Mayor Choi Soo-jin of New Busan appeared in the vision, but she was changed. Her consciousness had been merged with thousands of others, creating a being that was part human, but also part of everything the Devourers had ever absorbed. "Hyunwoo," she said, speaking to Admiral Yoon directly. "We tried to resist at first, but now we understand. The Devourers don't destroy. They preserve. We are eternal now. Join us." Captain Lee Hyunwoo, who had discovered the empty colonies, felt tears running down his face. "What have they done to you?" "They have given us perfection." "The vision of," Mayor Choi replied. "No more fear, no more loneliness. We are part of something greater now." But Captain Ryu Ji-soo, the intelligence officer who had studied the enemy, noticed something wrong with the vision. "Admiral, look at their eyes." Yoon focused on the face of Mayor Choi in the vision. Her expression was peaceful. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were screaming. "They're still trapped in there," Ryu whispered. "The real people are still inside, watching themselves say these things but unable to control it." The realization spread through the human fleet like fire. The absorbed colonists weren't happy. They were prisoners forced to smile while their consciousness was used to lure other humans into the same trap. "You made a mistake," Admiral Yoon broadcast to the Devourers. "You absorbed our people, which means you absorbed our memories, our knowledge, our technology. But you also absorbed something you didn't expect." "What?" the ancient creature asked, genuinely curious. "Human rage. The first human attack came not from the military ships, but from Captain Park Min-soo's converted cargo hauler Incheon. He had been one of the traders who regularly visited New Busan. He had friends among the absorbed colonists. This is for Mayor Choi," he broadcast as his ship accelerated toward the nearest devourer creature. "And this is for everyone else you stole." The Incheon fired every weapon it had while flying straight at the alien creature. The plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes that engineer Han Sung-min's team had developed struck the creature's hull and caused massive explosions. But more importantly, they caused pain. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers felt something they had forgotten: fear. The creature that Incheon had attacked reeled back, its song becoming discordant. The quantum disruption warheads were designed to cause explosions when the alien crystals tried to absorb them, and the effect was devastating. "All ships," Admiral Yoon ordered. "Attack!" 700,000 ships opened fire at once. The space around Kepler 442 erupted with light as millions of weapons discharged simultaneously. The Devourers had faced resistance before, but never anything like this. Other species had fought with a few hundred ships at most. Humanity had brought everything they had, and then some. The sheer volume of fire overwhelmed the creature's ability to sing the crews into submission or absorb the incoming attacks. "Sir," reported Captain Lee So-young with excitement in her voice, "the quantum weapons are working. Every time they try to convert our attacks into crystal, the disruption field causes internal explosions." The largest devourer creature, the one that had been communicating with the humans, sent out a desperate call. More creatures began emerging from the feeding structures around the star. Hundreds of them, each the size of a city. "Now we see their true numbers," Admiral Shin observed. "How many humans do you think they've absorbed?" "Millions," Dr. Lim replied, grimly. "Maybe billions from all the species they've harvested." But humanity had brought 50 million people to this battle. Every ship carried crews who had volunteered to fight for their species' freedom. The battle for the Kepler system raged for 6 days. Space burned with the light of 1,000 suns as human ships fought creatures that had conquered galaxies. The Devourers had expected easy prey. Instead, they found a species that grew more dangerous when cornered. Captain Park Min-soo's attack on the first Devourer creature had shown humanity something crucial. These ancient beings could be hurt. More importantly, they could feel fear. Now the human fleet pressed their advantage with everything they had. Ghost Squadron, you're clear for Attack Run 7, Admiral Yoon broadcast from the flagship Seoul. He watched as 20 converted cargo ships dove toward a Devourer creature that was trying to sing a group of human vessels into submission. Ghost Squadron was Captain Park Min-soo's creation. After his ship Incheon had survived the first attack, other civilian captains had asked to join his tactics. They flew ships that looked harmless. Old cargo haulers, mining vessels, even a few passenger transports. But each one carried enough firepower to level a city. Remember, Park's voice came through the communication channel. These things expect us to fight like a proper military. So we fight like angry merchants instead. The Ghost Squadron ships scattered in all directions, flying patterns that made no tactical sense but somehow worked. The Devourer creature tried to track them with its feeding tendrils, but the humans were too unpredictable. While it focused on the dancing cargo ships, larger human warships moved in from behind and struck its unprotected sections. The creature's scream of pain echoed through space as quantum torpedoes exploded inside its body. Blue fluid that might have been blood poured from massive wounds. For a moment, its singing stopped entirely. "Direct hit," reported Engineer Kim Taemin from his monitoring station. "The quantum disruption is causing cascade failures in their organic systems." But the Devourers were learning too. The creatures began to adapt their tactics, working together in ways they hadn't needed to for millions of years. 3 of them would surround a group of human ships and sing in harmony, creating a music so beautiful that even the sonic dampeners couldn't completely block it. Admiral Shin Kyung-ho watched helplessly as an entire battle group of human ships slowed to a stop, their crews overwhelmed by the alien song. Blue light poured down from the Devourer creatures, beginning the crystal conversion process. "Not today," Shin muttered, and ordered his flagship to ram the nearest creature at full speed. The collision was spectacular. Shin's heavy cruiser, Daejeon, struck the Devourer creature with such force that both ships exploded in a ball of plasma that could be seen from the other side of the system. But the sacrifice worked. The creature's death scream disrupted the singing long enough for the trapped human ships to break free. This became the pattern of the battle. The Devourers would try to sing human crews into submission, and humanity would respond with tactics so aggressive they bordered on insane. Ships would ram creatures 10 times their size. Crews would manually detonate their own reactors to take alien vessels with them. Captains would fly directly into the mouths of Devourer creatures and fire all weapons at point-blank range. "Sir," Fleet Admiral Bay reported to Admiral Yoon, "we're losing ships faster than we can count, but we're taking them with us." The tactical display showed the brutal truth. Of the 700,000 ships that had entered the Kepler system, fewer than 400,000 were still fighting. But the Devourers were suffering too. Their ancient formation of feeding creatures was broken, and dozens of the massive beings floated dead in space. Dr. Lim's research ship had been studying the battle from a safe distance, analyzing everything. They could learn about Devourer biology. What she discovered changed the course of the war. "Admiral, I've found their weakness," she broadcast urgently. "The creatures aren't individual beings. They're all connected through quantum entanglement to a central consciousness. That's how they coordinate their attacks and share absorbed." Memories. Where is this central consciousness? Yoon asked. Inside the largest feeding structure around the star. But Admiral, if we can disrupt that quantum network, all the creatures will lose coordination. They'll become just large animals instead of a coordinated force. Yoon studied the tactical display. The central feeding structure was protected by hundreds of devourer creatures and surrounded by crystal formations that could absorb any attack. Getting close enough to plant quantum disruptors would be suicide. I need volunteers, he announced to the entire fleet. The response was immediate. 50,000 ships volunteered for what everyone knew was a one-way mission. Captains who had been farmers, merchants, tourists, and factory workers all stepped forward to carry quantum disruptors into the heart of enemy territory. Commander John Woo-seok, a young officer who had been flying passenger shuttles between Earth and Mars before the war, was chosen to lead the mission. His small ship could slip through the enemy defenses better than larger vessels. "Sir," John said to Admiral Yoon before launching, "if this works, will it free the people trapped in the crystals?" Dr. Lim thinks so. The quantum disruption should break down the crystal matrices holding their consciousness. John nodded. "Then let's go get our people back." The final assault on the central feeding structure was the most desperate battle in human history. 50,000 volunteers flew their ships into a storm of alien creatures, singing and blue fire. Most of them died before getting anywhere near their target. But some got through. John's shuttle Mokpo slipped between the massive tendrils of the feeding structure, dodging crystal formations that tried to grab his ship. Behind him, Captain O. Ji-won's destroyer Ulsan provided covering fire, its weapons blazing as devourer creatures swarmed toward them. "Woo-seok, you have 30 seconds before they overwhelm us," O broadcast. John flew his shuttle directly into the heart of the feeding structure, where the quantum network nodes pulsed with stolen energy from countless civilizations. The quantum disruptors his ship carried were designed to create cascade failures in the alien consciousness network. "For New Busan," he shouted as he manually triggered the disruptors. The explosion that followed was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Reality itself seemed to crack as the quantum fields collapsed. The massive feeding structure began to tear itself apart from the inside as millions of years of stolen consciousness fought to break free. Across the Kepler system, the effect was immediate. The devourer creatures stopped their coordinated attacks and began writhing in apparent agony. Their song became a discordant wail of confusion and pain. For the first time in millions of years, they were experiencing individuality instead of collective consciousness. "All ships, press the attack," Admiral Yoon ordered. "Hit them while they're confused." The remaining human fleet, now fewer than 200,000 ships, poured everything they had into the disoriented creatures. Without their quantum network to coordinate them, the devourers fought like wild animals instead of a unified force. But the most important result was what happened to the crystal formations? All across the system, the blue crystals began to crack and shatter, and from the breaking crystals came something beautiful, the voices of the absorbed colonists, finally free to speak their own words. "This is Mayor Choi Soo-jin of New Busan," came a transmission from the largest crystal formation. "We're alive! The crystals are breaking down! We can control our own minds again!" Similar calls came from throughout the system as millions of consciousness were freed from their crystal prisons. The colonists from New Seoul, Busan Prime, Terra Sol, and dozens of other worlds were still trapped in the crystal structures. But now they were themselves again. The battle continued for 2 more days as the human fleet systematically destroyed the remaining devourer creatures. Some of the ancient beings tried to flee toward deep space, but human ships pursued them relentlessly. "Let them run," Captain Nam Do-hyun said as his ship chased a wounded creature toward the edge of the system. "Let them carry the message to whatever else is out there. Humanity protects its own." When the last devourer creature was either destroyed or driven away, the Kepler system fell silent except for the voices of freed colonists calling out to their rescuers. The great feeding structures around the star began to collapse without the creatures to maintain them, and the star itself started to burn with its natural yellow light again. Admiral Yoon stood on the bridge of the Soul, looking out at the aftermath of the greatest battle in human history. Space was filled with debris from both human and alien ships. Of the 700,000 vessels that had answered the colony's call for help, fewer than 30,000 remained functional. "Sir," reported Captain Lee So-young, "we're receiving transmissions from crystal formations throughout the system. Preliminary count shows over 15 million human consciousness have been freed." Yoon nodded, feeling the weight of both victory and loss. They had saved their people, but the cost had been enormous. 50 million humans had volunteered for this mission. Fewer than 5 million were still alive. "Admiral," came a transmission from one of the rescue ships working to extract people from the damaged crystal formations. "We've found something else." The crystals didn't just store human consciousness. They stored the memories of every species the devourers ever absorbed. "We're looking at millions." 6 months after the Battle of Kepler, Admiral Yoon Sang-ho stood in the memorial garden on Luna, reading names carved into black stone. The list seemed to go on forever. 50 million people had volunteered to answer the colony's call for help. 45 million had not returned home. Earth's skies no longer thundered with the sound of 700,000 ships preparing for war. The few dozen vessels that passed overhead now were mostly cargo haulers, bringing supplies to rebuild. The colonies, or passenger transports carrying families to be reunited with loved ones who had been freed from the crystal prisons. "Sir," Captain Lee So-young approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt his thoughts. She had become his aide after surviving the battle in the Kepler system. "The Council is ready for your report." Yoon nodded and took one last look at the memorial wall. Among all the names, he found the ones that mattered most to him personally. Commander John Woo-seok, who had flown his shuttle into the heart of the Devourer network. Admiral Shin Kyung-ho, who had rammed his ship into an alien creature to save a trapped battle group. Captain Park Min-soo, whose converted cargo hauler had started the first successful attack against the enemy. The council chamber in Geneva felt different now. The same representatives from Earth's nations and colonies sat around the same holographic display, but everything had changed. Humanity had faced extinction and survived, but the cost had left deep scars on their civilization. President Kang Min-ho looked older than his years as he called the meeting to order. "Admiral Yoon, please give us your final report on Operation Guardian." Yoon activated the display, showing the current status of human space. Where once there had been empty colonies marked in red, now there were rebuilding efforts marked in yellow and green. "The immediate crisis is over," he began. All surviving colonists have been successfully extracted from the crystal formations and returned to medical facilities. The process of rebuilding New Busan, New Seoul, and the other affected colonies has begun. Chancellor Seo Hee-won leaned forward. "What about the psychological effects on the people who were absorbed?" Dr. Lim Yoon-ji, who had been working with the freed colonists answered. The experience of being trapped in the crystal matrices has affected everyone differently. Some remember everything and are dealing with severe trauma. Others have gaps in their memory. But they're all alive and human, which is more than we dared hope for during the battle. And the alien technology we recovered? Asked Premier Jiang. Wu Jin. The quantum disruption weapons have been integrated into our defense systems, reported engineer Han Sung-min. We're also studying the Devourer biotechnology, but carefully. We don't want to accidentally create something we can't control. Yoon continued his report. The most significant development is what we learned from the crystal archives. The Devourers had been absorbing civilizations for over 12 million years. The memories and knowledge of thousands of species are now in our possession. The weight of this revelation settled over the room. Humanity had suddenly become the inheritors of millions of years of galactic history, technology, and culture from species that had been extinct for longer than Earth had existed. What do we do with all that knowledge? President Kang asked. We honor it, Yoon replied simply. Every species the Devourers absorbed had families, dreams, art, and discoveries. They all tried to survive and failed. The least we can do is remember them. Captain Ryu Jisoo, who had been analyzing the intelligence gathered during the battle, added her report. We've also learned that the Devourers weren't the only threat out there. The crystal archives contain references to other ancient species that harvest or destroy younger civilizations. The galaxy is more dangerous than we thought. Which brings me to my recommendation, Yoon said, changing the display to show his proposal for humanity's future. We need a permanent defense fleet stationed at the edge of human space. Not 700,000 ships this time, but enough to respond quickly to any new threats. The display showed his plan. 50,000 warships constantly patrolling the borders of human territory, ready to respond to any call for help from any source. They would be crewed by volunteers from all the human worlds, serving as guardians against the dark. The Memorial Fleet, he called it, named for everyone we lost saving our people. Fleet Admiral Bae Young-soo, who had survived the battle aboard, one of the few remaining military vessels, supported the proposal. We've learned that there are predators out there who see kindness as weakness and civilization as something to be harvested. The Memorial Fleet will make sure they know that. Humanity is neither kind nor civilized when our people are threatened. The discussion that followed lasted for hours. Some representatives worried about the cost of maintaining such a large military force. Others questioned whether humanity should become the self-appointed guardians of the galaxy. But Captain Nam, Do-hyun, whose deep space reconnaissance had first detected the Devourer threat, made the argument that settled the debate. The colonies called for help, and we answered with everything we had. That's who we are as a species. If someone else calls for help tomorrow, human or alien, we'll answer that call too. The Memorial Fleet isn't about conquest or control. It's about making sure no one else goes through what our colonists experienced. The vote was unanimous. 3 months later, the Memorial Fleet was officially established. The ships were newer and better than anything humanity had built before, incorporating technology learned from both the battle and the crystal archives. But more importantly, they carried crews who understood the cost of freedom. Captain Oh Ji-won, promoted to admiral after her heroics in the Kepler battle, commanded the flagship New Busan. The ship was built where the orbital station of the original colony had once stood, a symbol of humanity's refusal to let tragedy define them. Sir, her communications officer reported during their first patrol mission, we're receiving a distress signal from the Vega system, unknown attackers requesting immediate assistance. Oh looked at her crew, many of whom were veterans of the Devourer War. They had all lost friends, family, or comrades in that battle. They knew the price of answering calls for help. "Set course for Vega. Maximum speed," she ordered, "and signal the rest of the fleet. If something's threatening innocent people, it's about to learn what happens when you mess with humanity's neighbors." Back on Earth, in the Memorial Garden on Luna, families came to visit the names of those who had died defending human space. Children who had been born after the war played among the monuments, their laughter echoing off the black stone that bore the names of heroes. Mayor Choi Soo-jin, restored to her position as head of the rebuilt New Busan colony, often brought her granddaughter to the memorial. The little girl didn't understand why her grandmother sometimes cried when looking at the names, but she knew they were important. "Grandmother, why are there so many names?" the child asked during one visit. "Because when people we loved called for help," these brave people answered, Choi explained. "They didn't just send a message or a few ships, they sent everything. And because of that, you get to grow up free." The child considered this seriously. "If someone called for help today, would we answer?" Choi smiled, looking up at the sky where the ships of the memorial fleet patrolled the darkness between stars. "Yes, little one. We always answer." In the deep space beyond human territory, scattered groups of devourer survivors told their story to other ancient species. The tale of the small blue world whose people had turned a simple cry for help into the largest military response in galactic history became a legend whispered in the dark between stars. "Avoid the humans," the survivors warned. "They are not like the others. They do not surrender. They do not run. When their people call for help, they answer with everything they have. And when they fight like the universe itself is ending." Some species heeded the warning. Others, driven by curiosity or hunger, ventured toward human space to test these claims. They learned, as the devourers had learned, that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to abandon anyone who called for help. The last message from the colonies had been, "Help." Humanity's answer would echo through the galaxy for generations. "We're coming. All of us." In the rebuilt cities of New Busan, children played in streets that had once been covered with alien crystals. Their laughter was the sound of victory, not just over the devourers, but over the fear that had tried to silence the colonies forever. The sky above them was protected by ships crewed by people who remembered that freedom isn't free, but that some things are worth any price. The memorial fleet kept watch over a universe that had learned a simple truth. When humanity hears a call for help, they don't just send aid, they send everything, and that makes all the difference.